Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads, and we continue with Kaya's escape. Chapter 2: Slaves of the Enemy. The raiders moved the herd eastward over the buffalo trail as quickly as they could. As they rode, Kaya caught glimpses of the Laksa River in the valley, but the trail stayed on top of the ridge. This was easier up here than the wooded gullies filled with windfall trees. Kaya had been on this trail before. It was an old pathway made long before Nimipu had horses. In some places it split and braided together again, where travelers had walked around fallen trees or boulders. In other places it was only a narrow ledge hugging a cliff. Kaya watched the horses carefully when they came to the dangerous ledges. Surely the raiders or pushed them too fast along the bad part of the trail. The horse had lost its footing, fall down the rocky slope, and perhaps be killed. The gentle old pack horse that belonged to Cayusta often stumbled in fatigue. Kaya kept her eye on the old horse, hoping to keep it up, but kept on a curving ledge he slipped on the loose rocks. Kaya held back a cry as the horses tumbled down the bluff and the shower stones and lay still at the bottom. Wouldn't the raiders are slow the other horses now? But no, they only pushed them faster. Kaya kept her gaze on Steps High and prayed that her horse would keep her footing. Be strong, she urged Steps High and herself. Where were the enemies taking them? Each night at last light they camped in open glades where the horses could graze. A raider back scouted the trail to see if they were being followed. Kaya hoped that Tota and other men were coming behind and would overpower the raiders. She thought that the young men from Buffalo Country were no match for Nimihu men. When the scouts returned and the raiders continued on without rushing, Kaya knew no one was behind them. And at the highest point on the pass, Kaya gazed back at the mountains that loomed between her and home country. Her courage sank low. She told herself that Hunyawat had made the sky above her and the earth beneath her. I am in his home no matter where I go, she thought. Still, fear was a bitter taste in her mouth as they moved farther from her people. Each night the raiders tied Kaya's leg to speaking reins. At first light, the raiders untied them and sent Kaya to gather heavy loads of wood for the fire. They fed Kaya and Speaking Rein only the scraps from their meals. Kaya felt like the starving dogs that would sometimes appear at camp out of nowhere, cringing and groveling for a bite of food. She vowed that if she would ever get back to her people, she would never take off those desperate, sad-eyed dogs. When they passed some hot springs where steaming water spouted from the rocks, the trail ran down the east side of the mountains. In another day, they'd reach the broad river valley below. Kaya remembered passing this way with her family when they went to hunt buffalo on the plains beyond. Then this country seemed full of promise and adventure. Now it seemed strange and menacing. A wide, swift river flowed north down the valley. If the raiders crossed the river, they'd be well on their way to home country. How would she and her sister get home from the valley so far away? In the valley, the raiders moved the horses at night to avoid being seen. Shortly after first light, they came to a small buffalo hunting camp of their people, hidden in a canyon. The hide-covered teepees were decorated with animals and birds, painted in brilliant colors so different from the brown tulle mat teepees of Kaya's people. As the raiders approached the camp, the hunters and the women gathered to greet them. The raiders rode proudly through the camp, displaying the horses and the girls they'd stolen. Though Kaya wouldn't let her feelings show, she was sick to see the raiders praised and honored. She winced when the man looked over the horses and stroked the ones they liked best. Steps High among them how she hated to have enemy hands on her horse. All the men and women in the camp were pleased and smiling, except one dirty boy with a sullen face who stared grimly at Kaya. It came to her that the angry-looking boy was a slave too, and that soon she and Speaking Rain would look as tired and bittered as he. Kaya stared at her feet when the woman came to inspect her in Speaking Rain. The women pinched the girl's arms to feel their muscles. They shook their heads and talked among themselves. They didn't sound pleased. Kaya and Speaking Rain were dirty, and their hair was tangled. They were used to bathing in the cold river and cleansing themselves in the heat of the sweat lodge every single day. Since they had been captured, they hadn't been able to wash. When the women saw Speaking Rain's cloudy eyes, they frowned and spoke angrily to the raiders. Were they saying that a blind slave was nothing more than another belly to feed? Would they decide that Speaking Rain was of no use to them and abandon her so far from Salmon River country? But one raider took Speaking Rain's arm and led her to a mother with a young baby. He said something that caused the mother to look more kindly at Speaking Rain. Kaya guessed he told the mother that the blind girl wasn't entirely useless. She could sing lullabies and could help the baby while the mother worked. Kaya hoped they'd soon realize what a skilled cord maker and weaver Speaking Rain was too. One of the older women, with gray hair and a lined face, held Kaya to her teepee. Bold designs of otters were painted on the teepee in bright yellow red. Kaya thought of the old woman as Otter Woman. She sat Kaya down and gave her buffalo meat to eat. When Kaya had eaten, the woman took Kaya to where the other women were cleaning hides. She handed Kaya a sharp-edged rib bone and made a scraping motion. She wanted Kaya to scrape the fat and meat from the hide that was staked to the ground. Kaya had often helped Cayusta clean the hides. She knelt by the buffalo hide and began to scrape it out with the rib bone. Other Otter woman watched her work for a while, then nodded in satisfaction. Kaya scraped even harder until her shoulders ached and her arms were sore. She vowed to work twice as hard in order to make up for Speaking Rain. Somehow she must protect her sister. When night came, Otter Woman led Kaya and Speaking Rain to her teepee. She spread hides for them beside her sleeping place and motioned for them to lie down. Taking a thick rawhide thong, she tied it around Kaya's ankle and then around her own. She made the knots tight so Kaya couldn't untie the thong and run away. She didn't bother to tie up Speaking Rain. A blind girl wouldn't try to escape. Speaking Rain pressed against Kaya's side. "Be strong," Kaya whispered to her. Otter Woman gave her a sharp pinch that meant, "Hush, go to sleep." Kaya clenched her teeth and vowed she would not cry, not even in the dark. But how could she sleep when her heart was aching so badly? She and Speaking Rain were slaves. They might never see their people again. At first light, Kaya was sent to gather firewood. She watched the hunters ride away from camp to hunt the buffalo in the valley. Later in the day, when the men returned with the buffalo they had killed, they gave the meat and hides to the women. Otter Woman sent Kaya to work and let Speaking Rain to sing a lullaby to a baby. All day the women worked, cutting up the meat and hanging the strips on poles to dry. They scraped and tanned the hides, wasting nothing. Kaya's arms and back ached from the hard work of scraping. When she grew dizzy from the sun and weary from work, she told herself to be strong for Speaking Rain. Black and white magpies swooped over the drying meat, stealing bits from themselves. Magpie, Kaya's nickname. She had tried to be more responsible, but then she disobeyed Ista's order to run for safety in the woods. The mistake had put her and Speaking Rain into captivity. Maybe I deserved the nickname after all, Kaya thought miserably. She picked up a magpie feather, put in her bag, a reminder that she must think of others before herself. From where Kaya worked, she often caught glimpses of Steps High grazing with the other horses. If only she could get to her horse, touch her, stroke her. Kaya watched for a chance to approached the herd, but the boys who tended the horses never seemed to leave them. One evening, when the sun blazed on the horizon, Kaya saw a horse move away from the herd and come near the camp. The horse was steps high. The herders didn't seem to notice the lone horse, or maybe the sun blinded them when they looked her way. Kaya ran behind the teepees and into the sagebrush behind the camp. She stopped there and whistled softly. Her horse raised her head and came closer. Before Kaya could reach her horse, a man strode up beside her, a raw-hide rope in his hand. Angrily, he struck Kaya's legs with a rope and gestured for her to get back to the camp. As she turned to go, she saw the rope bridle on Stepside's lower jaw. Confidently, he leaped onto Stepside's back and rode away from camp. Kaya watched her beautiful horse galloping swiftly across the plain. If only I could jump on your back and race away from here, she thought. The man kicked Steps high until she was running flat out. Her shadow flew at her heels. Then she began to buck. The man whipped her with his quirt and saw the rope bridle in her mouth. He dragged the horse's head around and rode in a circle. When he managed to subdue her, he managed her back toward the camp and whipped her harder. Blood stained the ladder on her neck and shoulders. Kaya wanted to cry out, "Stop!" but she could do nothing to protect her horse. She was a slave. When Kaya was sent into the thickets to gather firewood, she sometimes took Speaking Rain along to help them carry back the heavy bundles. The slave boy was sent for wood too. Kaya thought he was about her age, and she wanted to know more about him. Once she came close, he frowned and turned away. Kaya knew he must be ashamed to be doing the work of women. Kaya didn't follow him. These times were her only chance to talk freely with Speaking Rain. "The hunt will soon be over," Kaya said one morning. "They almost have as much dried meat as the pack horses can carry." Speaking Rain sighed. "It's getting colder soon. Soon they'll start back to their country. If only we could escape before they take us farther away," Kaya said. Speaking Rain agreed. "But how can we? We have to go when it's dark, and at night I'm tied to Otter Woman." "Could you cut the thong?" Speaking Rain asked. "The knife is in her pack, but I can't reach it," Kaya said. "But I'm not tied up," Speaking Rain said. "I'll find her the knife and give it to you." Kaya thought for a moment as she wound a thong around the armful of dry branches that Speaking Rain held. Speaking Rain was quiet too. "Even if you cut yourself free, I'd never be able to keep up with you on the run," she said slowly. "You'll have to go without me." Kaya winced at the thought. "I'd never do that," she said. She had gotten her sister into this, and she couldn't leave her here as a slave. "You have to leave me," Speaking Rain's voice was firm. "You must escape so you can bring others back to get me." Kaya pressed her fingertips to Speaking Rain's lips. "Don't say that. How could I go without you?" "Because it's our only hope," Speaking Rain said. Kaya lifted a bundle of wood into Speaking Rain's back and took the second bundle onto her own. "But even if I escape, could I get to Salmon River Country before snow falls?" she asked. Speaking Rain was quiet for a moment. "Could you take your horse?" she said. "You'd travel much faster on Steps High." "They'd sure to see me if I try that," Kaya said. "I'd rather slip away on foot. But if I go on foot," her head was spinning, "I don't know what to do. Help me." Speaking Rain said. "If Cayusta were captured, what would she do?" Kaya blinked. She knew the answer to that. Cayusta would try to escape. Speaking Rain said. "We must start hiding some of your food from your journey." As they trudged back to the camp, Kaya's man raced with questions. "How can I leave my sister behind? What will happen to Steps High?" Then a more terrifying thought came to Kaya. "What if I escape, but I'm captured again? What will the enemies of Buffalo Country do to me then?" When Kaya came back to the camp from scraping hides that day, she saw the skinny slave tending a fire. There were burrs caught in his hair, and the only clothing was a rag breechcloth and worn moccasins. As she came near him, he motioned her to stop. He glanced around, and then with his hands he threw her the words, "Do you speak sign language?" Kaya had learned how people talked their gestures when they couldn't speak each other's language. She made the answer with her hands. "I speak sign language." "What tribe are you?" he sighed. She pointed to herself and then swept her hand from ear across her chin. "I am Nimipu," her hand said. "What tribe are you?" "I am Salish," he sighed. Then he ducked his head because others came near. Kaya went to the otter teepee, but her thoughts were on the boy. Her people had many friends among the Salish. Nimipu often fished and traded with the Salish. Some had even married Salish men and women. Perhaps she and this boy could find a way to help each other. The next time she had the chance, she picked up some sticks and took them to where the boy was building a fire. Placing sticks by his feet, she crouched beside him. Would he frown and turn away again? Instead, he met her gaze. Maybe he too had been thinking about how to help each other. She threw him the words, "What are you called?" "I am called Two Hawks," he sighed. She sighed to him. "I am called Kaya," she said out loud. He narrowed his eyes and said slowly, "Kaya." She nodded. Then she had an idea. Perhaps she and Two Hawks could escape together. Two would have a better chance to make it back to the Buffalo Trail and over the mountains than one traveling alone. Would he come with her? And could she trust this boy? She wished she could know him better before she risked telling him her plan. He might betray her to the enemy in the hope of being rewarded with more food. Kaya watched for a chance. It came when she and Two Hawks were sent to bring cooking water over the river. When Kaya was sure no one could see them in the reeds by the river, she sighed. "How long have you been a slave?" "I've been a slave for a long time," he answered. "I was captured in a raid on our village. I don't know where my family is, or even if anyone's still alive." Kaya glanced over her shoulder. They were still alone, but it wouldn't be long before others came here for water. This could be the only chance she had to tell him her plan. She'd have to take the risks. "Pay attention to me," she sighed. "I'm going to Nimipu country. Soon. Come with me to my family." His dark eyes bored into her. Then he threw her words. "I want to go to Nimipu country with you." Though his solemn expression gave away nothing, she realized he understood. "We will need hides. We will need food," she sighed. He shook his head. "No, let's go now." Kaya frowned. This foolish boy, she thought. If he acted recklessly, he put them in danger. Didn't he know they'd have to wait for a dark night where they couldn't be seen? Didn't they realize they must plan ahead if they were to make it to safety? "Be patient," she sighed. "I'll give you a signal." "Now," he repeated. Then he pointed to the horse heard not far downstream. Kaya looked. Men were separating a few horses from the herd. Other men were tying bundles of buffalo hides on the backs of the horses. She saw Steps High was one of the horses carrying a load of hides. "What are they doing with those horses?" she sighed. "I understand their words a little," he sighed. "They're going to trade those horses and hides to another hunting party. Then they'll leave for buffalo country. Soon. We must run away now." Kaya's mind was whirling. Steps High was going to be traded away. Even now the men were riding off with loaded horses. Steps High tossed her head and whinnied. She trailed behind the others as if she knew she was being taken far away from Kaya. Grief was a knife in Kaya's chest as she watched over her beloved horse disappear over the rise. Two Hawks was right. They must escape soon or be taken much, much farther away from home country. Kaya bit her lip. How could she bear to leave her sister and lose her horse as well? And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.